the organizers of Electromining Africa. And although this year's event is not live due to the COVID-19 pandemic, to maintain the spirit of the show, this week Electromining Africa has been hosting an Electromining Africa Connect Week to stay in contact with all of our respective stakeholders. And today is no different. It's both a happy and a sad moment for us. This would have been the last day of the show live here at the Joburg Expo Center. Due to a global, who would have thought, a global pandemic, we were unable to host the live event. But as an aside, an important aside, in terms of our contribution from a venue perspective, the Joburg Expo Center has been converted into a field hospital and assisted where it could in terms of providing healthcare for those affected by COVID-19. Today's, ladies and gentlemen, today's topic is around the early career development of engineering professionals. And a topic that really strikes a chord with me. I've got a youngster who's just qualified as an engineer, and he's asked me to ensure that we record today's session, which is being done by Creamer Media, our partners from a media perspective. It's on their website. And it will be also posted on the electrominingafrica.co.za website. For the last 48 years, Electromining Africa has been at the forefront of delivering the latest products, services, innovations, and technologies to a captive and receptive audience, bringing together industries from mining, manufacturing, electrical, power generation, transport, and new for this year, automation, all matters automation. It's the largest show of its kind on the African continent and a highly anticipated one by all. That makes this year's cancellation of the 2020 edition as a result of the global COVID-19 pandemic all the more disappointing. But we've produced a digital booklet which will be provided to all attendees. We encourage everybody to have a look at that. And let's tap into the concept of staying connected and keeping these conversations going within our respective industry sectors. I'd like to thank our hosts as well, SAIMechE, Vaughan, you and Anissa and the team, all behind the scenes. To put a webinar like this together takes a massive team effort, and we thank everybody involved behind the scenes. Getting into today's webinar, just some information, perhaps housekeeping for our attendees. There's a chat option on the Zoom call today. We encourage everybody to post messages. I see there's one there already. Welcoming everybody here. Feel free to communicate. There will also be a Q&A button. There is a Q&A button there. Feel free to post any questions you may have for any of our panelists today. And as I said earlier, the webinar will be recorded and will be available on both the Electromining Africa and the Creamer Media websites. Matters Professional, Matters Engineering. We have an incredible panel today. And if you have a look at your screen, I'm sure some of the panelists will be recognizable to a lot of our attendees today anyway. But it's important to note that, yes, engineering typically is associated with a sort of male slant in terms of participants and a typically male type industry. But we are very proud to have panelists today that have been, and believe me, when I get to their bios, they're incredibly impressive. Ladies that have managed to carve out careers and are now going beyond that, but actually contributing to assisting the next generation of young engineers, whether it's electrical, mechanical, chemical, doesn't matter. Any of the technically oriented young generation that are coming through, our panelists will hopefully today be able to share some insights that you will be able to relate to and will resonate with you. So with that as an intro and a backdrop to today's webinar, I'd like to speak to our first panelist. I'm going to read a brief CV and profile. Suela Portia Moketla is the Senior Product Engineer at Komatsu Mining Corporation. Portia completed her BSc Mechanical engineering qualification at the University of Witwatersrand in 2011. In 2016, she graduated with a B Engineering Honours from the University of Pretoria. She is a registered professional mechanical engineer with 7 years of industry experience in defense, energy, and mining industries. She has a passion for developing the engineering profession and is currently part of the review panel for mechanical engineering at EXA. She is currently employed as a product engineer at Komatsu Mining Corporation. Portia, bearing in mind your experience and your learnings, perhaps you could share something of interest about yourself, about your experience, and really get a message across to the young professionals that have hooked in today, just to perhaps resonate with them in terms of your experience and what is possible in terms of growth in the engineering sector. Portia, over to you.
Hi, Gary. Hi to everybody on the webinar. Thank you for this opportunity. Basically, I started out in 2012 in the defense industry. And while there, I quickly realized that engineering is not so much what you expect it to be when you leave university. So quickly after that, I decided that I wanted to pursue my professional registration. And lucky for me, I got an opportunity to join Eskom, which runs professional registration programs under a company commitment. And that basically gave me the opportunity to sort of tailor my career towards professional registration. So for me, the idea was, what do I want to achieve? And then go for that and get into a company that allows me to do that. And as you graduate, you quickly realize that not all companies are going to give you that expectation, and it's up to you to decide where you fit in and which career path you'd like to pursue. Thank you, Gary.
Portia, a quick question. In terms of your early career expectations, what took you into the space of engineering? What was it that awakened that interest in you? Bearing in mind the typical, stereotypical nature of engineering, it's rugged, it's rough, it's tough. I know from a personal perspective, you know, I don't have a technical aptitude. It's not just something that one day you can fall into. It's quite a very specific skill set. How did you end up in this space?
So I know I don't look like it, but I'm a farm girl. I grew up on a farm. I have a brother who did mining engineering. So on the farm, as you can imagine, with my father starting up the farm as I was growing up, quite a lot of things broke, quite a lot of problems arose, and it's problem solving left, right, and center. So the idea becomes, okay, what can I do, you know, to help solve problems and get interested in this field and that field? And eventually you learn about all sorts of engineering and you pick one. So for me, mechanical was the most broad, which allowed me to sort of figure out what a John Deere tractor does, do all sorts of other things. So it's basically from that background of having grown up in that environment with people who are just technically inclined. And yeah, I think that's what led me to join engineering as a profession.
Very interesting. So there was obviously an initial frame of reference. Did you find that you had any mentors, people that assisted you to follow it through in terms of the professional qualifications and experience that you gained?
Yeah, so for me, I always say I'm very lucky. I had my brother who started by trying to do chemical engineering and then ventured out into mining. So he sort of was my mentor because he could tell me, okay, this is going to get harder and harder as you go. And this is basically how you handle it. So one of my mentors, lucky for me, was my brother. And then early on in my career, I had two great mentors, one in the first company that I worked for, and then the other one at Eskom, who sort of led me through and said, how do you position yourself in the career? What would you like to do? How would you like to channel your skills? And basically bringing you back to reality of, I'm not going to be the engineer I thought I was when I was in varsity. Industry requires you to be a little bit more multi-skilled. Varsity, I think you you rely on yourself quite a lot. The projects you do with teams are minimal. Your interactions with people are quite minimal. So by the time you get to work, you really need to get your people skills up. And that's where the mentors came in handy for me, because everything you do at work is a team. At varsity, you might fail 1 or 2 projects if you don't do your teamwork properly, but you can basically get by just with yourself and your own commitment.
Some fantastic insights there. It's incredible how the hard skill of engineering, as you go into your field of expertise, needs to be complemented or supplemented with the softer skills around the people engagement. Portia, thanks for those insights. And I'm sure we'll be asking you some more detailed questions as we get to the Q&A. Thanks for sharing. Our next panelist, Sai Garar, is Business Development Executive President at Acton. Sai has been part of the energy industry in South Africa for over 25 years. She started her career as a consultant and later was appointed as the City Electrical Engineer for East London. Wow, tough job. With more than 2 decades of experience as an electrical engineer, Sai holds a number of qualifications, including a Bachelor in Engineering, Electrical and Electronics, a Master's in Business Administration, so she's done an MBA, and a Government Certificate of Competency. Currently, she is the Business Development Specialist for Transmissions and Distributions and EPC with Acton. In this role, she is involved with the business development of different products manufactured within transmission and distribution, as well as the service offerings of the EPC division. Sai has also served as the President of the Association of Municipal Entities, AMEU, from 2008 to 2010, and been on the Executive Council since 2001 until 2011. She was the first female president of the AMEU, and she was instrumental in changing their constitution to include more women on the executive, thus paving the way for the next generation of female presidents. Sai, perhaps you can give us some insights and some advice really for our attendees today. What I find interesting about your CV, you're working for a big multinational, corporate environment, but you've done some incredible work in the public sector as well. I mean, you couldn't actually potentially get 2 more stark sectors to come from. Perhaps you could just touch on those experiences while sharing with our audience about how you've developed as a professional.
Thanks a lot, Gary, and good morning, everybody. So as Gary has already spoken about me, I think I'm just going to touch on a couple of salient contributions, as well as that I'm a mother of 2. So a lot of people think if you've got a heavy career, you can't actually balance your life, but it's something that I think all of us around this panel actually does manage to do. And on top of that, I'm also married. So you've got to make sure you're balancing your work as well as ensuring everything at home is running quite well. But you know, if you're a good engineer, you can delegate and you can actually manage that. So in terms of that, also maybe just to encourage the younger generation is that you don't have to be scared of commitment, be it at work or be it as a family. So one of the things that's quite difficult for electrical engineer is to also have your government certificate of competency. So one of the things is, especially someone being very active, when I was on maternity leave, I was bored to death. I was like, what do I do now? So I decided to study for my government certificate. So that's how I literally wrote my exam while I was on my maternity break. And so it's things that I think that can encourage the younger generation as well. But also I think what I'd like to put across is that you also got to spend a lot of time doing a lot of voluntary work. So I was quite involved with EXA, where we basically used to accredit all the universities, including Stellenbosch over there, Deborah. So we did all the engineering degrees, and also we used to accredit universities in other countries. So EXA is part of the Washington Accord, which is recognized internationally. So it's something that once you get involved in, you also look at the academic side of engineering from a professional or private sector. And as you've heard, I've also been involved with the municipalities and South African Institute of Electrical Engineers. And what I find is quite important is through these networks, you build a lot of networks, a lot of relationships, and especially a lot of mentors. So there is formal mentoring as well as informal mentoring. And it's something that I think a lot of our youngsters, I would like you to encourage. to spend some time with is your mentor as well as your networks. Thanks, Gary.
Sai, thanks for those insights. Perhaps I could probe just a little bit. Portia led into the importance of teamwork, and when you siloed and you're studying and you're acquiring hard skill, there's a single-minded focus in that space. How have you adapted moving from in between the public sector and a corporate sector with such a difference in culture? There has to be a difference in culture between different organizations like that. So you've got the hard skill at the center of what you do and your value proposition. How do you move from one to the other? And what sorts of mentors have assisted you in terms of making that type of transition? Because surely that's an important part of your success in your industry.
Thanks for that, Gary. I think first of all, before even I talk about the cross between private and corporate sector, is for me, the biggest change was when I came out of university. Yes, when you do engineering, you're one of the few females in that engineering environment, but you have a lot of students around. You don't feel it as much as when you get into the working environment, and all of a sudden you've got all these men around you, and a lot of them being elderly. And all of a sudden there's this young engineer and it's a female. It's like no one wants to listen to you. So you just got to be persistent, first of all. And I think one of the biggest things I've learned is don't concentrate on what people have to say or what people say. There's always a saying, small minds discuss people and great minds discuss ideas. So this is something that I've stuck to as a motto, and I think it helps me. But in terms of culture differences between being in private sector or public sector or corporate, I think you still get all the same similar politics between different people in the company. It's very similar. You have people not respecting, for example, your culture, or you being a female and you being an engineer or a qualified engineer. So these are just the normal stuff that you go through, no matter which institute you're at, which university you're at, or which private sector you're at. So it's just to put your head down, add value to what you are actually doing, and stick it out. And for me, what's very important is, again, networking, build those relationships.
Thanks. Some wonderful insights and some modesty there too. You say you're a mom of two, but you're married. You're actually a mom of three, but we won't split hairs on that.
Gary, I wanted to actually say happily married, but I don't know if that's a perspective from the husband's point of view.
Okay, we'll leave it at, I didn't build into your marketing and sales soft skills in terms of keeping all of those folk happy at home. Okay. But thanks for those insights. Really appreciate that, Si. Our next presenter is Professor Deborah Blaine, Associate Professor, Mechanical and Mechatronic Engineering at Stellenbosch University. Deborah has studied mechanical engineering at Stellenbosch University, graduating with a B.Eng in 1996. She continued her postgraduate studies at Stellenbosch University and the Pennsylvania State University, Penn State in the USA, eventually earning her PhD in engineering science in 2004. She stayed on as a research associate at the Center for Innovative Sintered Products at Penn State, where she completed her PhD research. In 2005, she moved to Germany to work as part of the materials and R&D team at Bleistal Productions in Wengen, Germany. Bleistal is the leading manufacturer of powder metal valve seat inserts and valve guides in the EU. She was promoted to deputy manager of the materials R&D team and worked in this position until she left for home to take up a position as a senior lecturer in mechanical and mechatronic engineering at Stellenbosch University in 2007. Kudos to Debbie for coming back to South Africa. She was the first woman to be promoted as associate professor in a 75-year history of mechanical and mechatronic engineering department at Stellenbosch University. She is a fellow of the South African Institute of Mechanical Engineers, SAIMechE, and was national president from 2018 to 2020. The first female president as well. She is a founding board member of the South African Society for Engineering Education and was national president of this body from 2017 to 2019. She continues to serve on the SAIMechE board. Another groundbreaking panelist, Debbie, please share some insights in terms of your career. Perhaps some direction just in terms of what I'm sure would be of interest to our participants today. Firstly, this dichotomy between education, between academia and the real world, and the practical application thereof. You've had that, and then not only that, you've been to 3 and very different countries. I couldn't imagine working in different environments: Germany, USA, and South Africa. And perhaps just share some insights through your experience, just touching on some of those aspects of your career.
Okay, so I'm trying to think of where to start. Well, good morning, everybody, first of all. So when I never imagined when I started studying that I would go into postgraduate studies. And I suppose it kind of happened more because I didn't really know where I wanted to go after I got my bachelor's degree, and I enjoyed doing research. For my final year project, I've done research, and so there was an opportunity for me to carry on doing research, and that's what I wanted to do. So I did that, and then an opportunity came up for me to go to the USA, and I particularly was interested in powder metallurgy and sintering, and it wasn't possible to study that within South Africa. There wasn't a focus on that research in South Africa, and so I took up that opportunity. And the town that I went to is called State College, and it was very similar to Stellenbosch in that, and in fact, they call that town, the valley that town is, they call it Happy Valley. And everybody knows that Stellenbosch is seen as this little bubble town in the Western Cape where everything is easygoing. So in terms of the different cultures, it was quite a familiar space that I was moving into. And I think what was quite comforting to me was to realize that my training as an engineer in South Africa, my bachelor degree, was top par with the other international students that I was studying with there for PhD, and with the American students. And my math skills, my science skills, all of the foundational skills for engineering were really on par with the rest of the people that I was studying with. The thing that I probably learned the most from the American environment that is Americans really know how to market themselves, and they taught that from a young age. They taught that you're the person who is going to drive your career, who's going to drive your success in your life, and you need to speak up, you need to represent, and you need to be confident. And I think in South Africa, we have a little bit more of a reverence for humility. And so people don't try to self-promote because it's just not our culture to do that. But I think especially for underrepresented groups in engineering, you need to be able to represent for yourself, because otherwise people are not going to take you seriously and are going to step over you. So I learned how to do that in that space. And obviously there's a balance between being confident and being overconfident, and trying to find that balance. That's something that you need to do. And then moving on into Germany. Germany, now you go from Americans who self-promote and you go back into this culture, German culture, where you don't self-promote. And the only way that you are evaluated is on your work ethic and on your professional behavior. And it takes a long time in the German, I would say it took about 6 months for my team to accept that I was serious and that I was a team player. So you kind of feel like you're on probation for a long time when you're working in that culture, where people will. I went into a company and I'd ask a colleague, "Oh, how do you guys do this?" And the response would be, "Well, you're the one with the PhD. Why are you asking us?" And which was quite weird for me, because I was coming from this American culture where you ask an American anything and they're just more than happy to help. Everybody wants to help. But I think that the key message here is that when you go into different spaces, there are different cultures, whether it's corporate culture, whether it's national culture, and to be sensitive and to not take things personally, and to realize there's just different ways of doing things. Go into that space, and if it seems like somebody's being rude to you or being abrupt with you, put your ego aside and realize you're here to do a job, and maybe the way that you're approaching it is not gelling, and so find the way to do the job, find the solution. And I think as engineers, that's what we train to do, is we train to deconstruct a problem, figure out what the best approach is, and then enact it. And that can translate into interpersonal situation as well. And I think what Sai was saying is those interpersonal relationships are key to getting your job done. So you need to figure out how to walk the line to get work done in your environment. And that just makes you a more well-rounded person and for a better work environment. And people then appreciate, okay, she didn't just stick to this is how I do things and either take it or leave it. Kind of figured out what is the space that I'm working in and how do I interact in the space so that I can be a team player. Okay, it's enough from me.
Deborah, very interesting actually. Just some takeouts of what you're talking about. It's encouraging to hear that the hard skill sets that you picked up in South Africa are world class. How Americans tend to promote themselves, just the cultural nuances around that. And then your final comment around team. It sounds like the engineering world is very much a team type oriented business, a collective of different skill sets, but all of them needing to at some stage come together to deliver on a project, and how that sort of diversity is crucial to be able to work with Germans, to be able to work with Americans, and then of course South Africans. And I think there's lesson in that for all of us, and particularly those younger generation listening. It doesn't matter on what sort of demographic tool you would want to use, your ability to adapt to an environment, to adapt to different people from different backgrounds, whether it's male, female, whether it's race, whether it's religion, it actually doesn't matter. All of you have hard skills, but you need to pull together to deliver a project. Very interesting. Thank you for those insights. I'm very excited to say that one of our panelists today was having difficulty getting on, but I see she's here, and I'm going to blindside her a little bit by going into reading her profile and then asking her just to share with us. Celia Malone is Director at the Center of Engineering Excellence. Welcome, Celia. She is an engineering and management professional registered with the Engineering Council of South Africa, EXA. Celia is also a member of the South African Institute of Mechanical Engineering, SAIMechE, and South African Asset Management Association. In addition to her engineering qualifications, Celia also holds business qualifications. She's currently a director in the Center for Engineering Excellence, the company that she herself founded earlier this year. She previously held various positions in the engineering industry with Armscor, City of Cape Town, Sasol, Department of Correctional Services, and Denel. That's a fair mix, Celia. Before she became chairperson of the SAIMechE Vaal branch, which she also founded. She has more than 25 years experience in the engineering profession and has built a wealth of experience, especially in the area of enterprise asset management. She has authored a number of publications on the subject of physical asset management and is still pursuing other endeavors to contribute further to the body of knowledge in this regard. So a very interesting CV. Yes, engineering, but very, very intimately linked with the concept and the principles of business. Perhaps you could share with our listeners and our viewers today just some insights into your career, but also how that journey between the hard skill of engineering and the typically softer skills of business have intertwined with each other. And I mean, that's led you to taking the risk of launching your own business as well. Please share it with us. Thank you, Celia.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks for your kind introduction. Trying to gel the hard skills of engineering and business. I'm not too sure where to start there, but look, I do enjoy my time or rather my introduction into the engineering field. maybe if I can just start by, how it all, started off in the beginning. I think contrary to the legitimate plight of many women in engineering, my entrance into this space was somewhat a beautiful roller coaster. Maybe just a little bit of background. I'm coming from girls only class in high school to being the only girl in class, in boys only class at tertiary, and ultimately to male dominated work environment. And well, if you add a bit of the fact that the demographics in that space as well was different from where I was coming from, with many males, being white, and many of them being more than my age at the time when I entered that space. It was quite eventful, But then I still had a lot of time to kind of find the environment very exciting, because it was very unusual, especially for a girl. So you would walk into that space and find things like, a clash of an aircraft. You haven't been in an aircraft to start with, things like those. So I found my workspace in the beginning very, very eventful and exciting. But then it doesn't end there. You've got a business to run as you grow. Then you're going to have to meddle being in business and making an equipment, being sympathetic to your profitability, what you're wanting to achieve with that business, meaning that you've got to integrate the skill of engineering, to make sure that it does deliver when it comes to your business side of things. But it takes a lot of trusting in the resources that are there. And the resources are mainly talking about your workforce. You're going to have to invest in a very good, team spirit to make sure that you deliver what needs to be delivered by that business. You're going to also have to make sure that you understand the science of engineering, because you are delivering an engineering product here, and you've got to deliver it in such a way that it impacts your profitability positively. Hence, what I said about my passion in the subject of physical asset management, which doesn't only talk to equipment. And I know we usually make a mistake of saying physical asset management, or rather, engineering asset management is maintenance. It's not maintenance. It's an integration of your human resources, your physical infrastructure, your finances, and everything. That now snugly talk to the subject of, can I say, an overall, business management. It doesn't only, you starting to depart from talking engineering only. You are integrating your engineering aspect of your work with your business aspect of your work, to make sure that you drive a successful value chain to achieve whatever the outcome that you want your business to achieve. I know I've just touched everywhere in the subject. I hope I had answered the question that you had put forth.
Celia, very insightful. Thanks. What I think is very interesting is how I think it talks to this this soft skill concept of understanding that engineering doesn't operate in a vacuum, and that the projects that you're involved in have a number of consequences to other types of disciplines, and that we live in an interdependent type world. So very interesting perspectives on that. Thank you for sharing. I'd like to move on to our next panelist, Alicia Cilliers. She's project engineer at Single Destination Engineering. She's a mechanical engineering specialist in a power plant design. She graduated from Northwest University in Potchefstroom in 2013. Her experience was gained in a wide range of projects regarding mechanical and process engineering disciplines. Key projects include power generation, a lot of which we need at the moment, ranging from industrial plants to IPP, utility plants of several hundred megawatts, and a biogas project serving an elution plant by displacing liquid fuel for oil heating and electrical heating for carbon regeneration. She's a shareholder of Single Destination Engineering and a member of the management team. Her responsibilities include design, procurement, client liaison, work packages, contractor coordination, management tracking and organizing of project finances, deliverables, and programs throughout the project life cycle. Wow. Alicia, a very practical, very important part of the engineering scope. Perhaps you could share with us your experiences and also just perhaps some of the challenges that you're facing that relate to a lot of us as lay people in terms of power generation, the managing. We can perhaps even from an eventing perspective relate to some of the project management aspects of what you do. Perhaps you can just share with us from that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the intro, Gary. Welcome to everybody. So I've basically been involved in power generation power plants across the Middle East and Africa. I was fortunate enough that my first project started off in Nigeria with a tri-fuel power plant, which actually means that turbines operate on 3 different types of fuel. The 3 fuels were natural gas, diesel, and HFO. So from my side, it's actually a very interesting role because sometimes we slot into just a consulting role. We usually support an EPC company, whether or not it's local or international. I've had some local jobs, I've had some international jobs, and I must say I quite enjoy working on several of them. If there's something I can teach the younger ones, every day you walk in, make sure you're irreplaceable. Fill the gaps that nobody sees. And please don't be afraid to make mistakes. It means you're trying. But if you make a mistake, please raise it immediately and please don't hide it from your seniors. It's going to catch up with you. And I think there's one thing that we've learned, especially after this whole COVID situation. You can plan, but absolutely be flexible.
Alicia, how did you get into engineering? I mean, how did you get onto that career path?
Oh, well, Gary, I actually grew up in a very small town in KZN. It's actually Pongola, which is a little bit Dinka, south of Swaziland. So I would have classified myself as a little bit of a tomboy who used to play with the guys. And I don't know, from the get-go, it's more the engineering drawings that really attracted me. And from there on, well, they promised us, I went to like an engineering introduction at Tikkies the one weekend. It was for like the standard 9s. And they promised us golf on Wednesdays and a lot of money. We're going to drive convertibles. And I promise you, it's not like that.
Why not? Alicia, thank you for those insights. I'd like to thank the panelists for sharing with us. And I think you've actually been, to be fair, a little bit modest in terms of all of your respective careers. That being said, there's a nice question here on the Q&A from Sanele, just asking, because I sort of touched on that, and perhaps our panelists can share in a little bit more detail with us. I would like to know how one can manage or strategize to transition from this academic environment into a working environment. And I'm sure, in terms of the practical experience we have from organizing an event, it's one thing sitting in a boardroom planning a whole lot of things and then physically rolling them out. That transition must actually be quite scary for young professionals. Particularly in your respective fields, electrical. I can just imagine you do something wrong in electricity. I'd be fried. I don't even go there. I mean, I could be life-threatening. Then I assume that, you know, when we talk matters mechanical, it's a little bit more orderly, things are moving. But because I don't have that kind of insight, I'm sure you must be even at more life risk in certain mechanical engineering scenarios. And you know, in fairness to young students, how would they discern between those things? Because it is different environment in a classroom, in a lecturing environment, to what you can actually see out there in the field. Perhaps, you know, Deborah, can you just maybe start the conversation just in terms of a shared insight there, coming from the world of academia at the moment, but having been in the world of commerce as well?
So I think that one of the biggest challenges in transitioning from being a student to being an engineer and working in an engineering environment is, and I think, I can't remember who it, maybe it was you, Portia, that touched on this, I can't remember, but anyway, I think it's the fact that when you're a student, you're in a class with hundreds of other students, and you all are working on the same projects and the same courses and the same things, and you're all doing the same things. And when you hand in your test or your tutorial, it's the same problem that your friend is, and you can compare your answers and see who understands things better. And that completely evaporates when you move into the working environment. I mean, when you're in a working environment, you're not both going to be working on exactly the same problem. You're going to be working on different aspects of a problem, and so that it can all come together. And I think that can be a bit lonely when you move in there. That camaraderie that you have in your class between your classmates and working with other people is gone. You all of a sudden, you're in an environment where you're surrounded by strangers, you are in a different culture, you're not sure whether you fit in, you're not really sure how to fit in, and that's intimidating and lonely. So I think it's important to have a support structure of people who know you and who appreciate you. And they don't have to be engineers, but keep in contact with the other people from your class that you were friends with, and talk to them about their other experiences. Join SAIMechE or SAIEE or SAICE or whatever. Join those engineering communities, and then go to the technical talks and keep up that connection of network with people who are like-minded, because I think that can be very intimidating and lonely when you move and you don't have people around. Just having one evening a month where you chat to other people and go, oh my gosh, I totally understand what that feels like, and so on, that just having that connection helps with that transition. You have all the technical tools, you have all of the training and everything. It's really finding your space in the world that is the next step. And also just realizing that nobody expects you to know it all at this point in your career. So if somebody says to me, how you've got an engineering degree, like, how can you not know how to do that? Then just say, well, I'm still learning. You know, I've got all the tools, but I've never used them before. So I'd appreciate any help that you can give me, any advice, and be open to advice. You know, don't be know-it-all, because that's when the older engineers are just like, oh, kids of today, they know it all. But if you have somebody who says like, oh, could you please explain that a bit better? Or I'm not really sure what you're asking me here. You know, learn how to use that language to find the help that you need. I think that's the advice that I would give on the transition. Yeah.
Thanks, Deborah. Portia, maybe I can ask you just to expand on what Deborah has been saying, because you know, you work in not only engineering, but you know, the yellow metal market is known. It's a rugged industry. You know, as event organizers, you know, we are involved in different industry sectors, and I can tell you now, like the difference between industrial mining and, say, packaging. You know, packaging industry that we're involved in, there's machinery, but it's nowhere near as rugged as say the mining sector. Yet the skills that are required are in many instances applied, but identical. You know what I mean? There are mechanical engineers involved intimately in the packaging industry, for example. So just expanding on what Deborah's saying, can you maybe just share from your perspective how you've transitioned from your studies, your previous experience, but also then managing that transition into a workplace where you need to engage socially, where you need to be part of a team, where and it's a hard industry. How do you manage that from a personal perspective?
I think, Gary, one thing we have to admit is that getting in there and transitioning is one of the hardest things you have to do. You have to accept your own inadequacies, if I had to put it that way. So you have to accept that although you're a qualified engineer, you're missing a little bit of that industry experience. There are people there who might not be as qualified as you, but who you can definitely learn something from. So a friend of mine often says, always assume that you can learn something from everybody that you talk to. And that generally helps, because once you start talking to people, even though they might not be in the same qualification category as you, you can definitely learn something from them. What that also does is it helps you to build relationship with those people. As an engineer, you're going to work with artisans, you're going to work with draftsmen, you're going to work with the customers. So you need to be willing to listen to those people, hear them, and then still take that information and apply your best engineering knowledge to it. So often as engineers, we'd like to dismiss what the rest of the people are saying. And that's because, just like Deborah said, you're coming from university with like-minded people dealing with similar problems, but out there, the problems are quite different, and how we experience them at different levels is also different. So you need to be willing to listen to those people and learn from them. As I said, learn each day what the other person has experience in.
Thank you, Portia. I see another question from Rian, and perhaps you could help us with some insights on this one, Sai. You know, the question centers around, how do I go as a young professional and start gaining experience? I'm prepared, you know, and that's great to see youngsters that are prepared to put themselves out there just to take on ad hoc jobs, go into any industry sector that they don't necessarily know much about. From your perspective and having worked in different sectors, public, private, what kind of advice would you give to youngsters that are looking just in and bearing in mind trading conditions are tough, opportunities are limited. How would you go about, and how did you go about gaining experience and putting yourself out there in terms of just growing your experience? Sai? Sorry, there we go.
Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Can you hear me now? Thanks for that question, Gary. I'm just checking. Can you hear me?
Yes, Sai, we can hear you. Go.
Okay, cool. So I think, it's quite common that sometimes it's quite difficult to get into jobs. And I think I was just having a chat to Deborah where she says, I think most universities have got those connections where they can actually place students into jobs. However, from the private sector, it is quite difficult unless you've already done like your internship with a particular company or so. But from an electrical point of view, I think if you're involved with the chapters, with the SAI chapters, for example, at university, you've got access to those networks where you're able to actually work with those professionals. And if you go through a formal engineering training mentorship, which is required for extra professional registration, then you're actually meeting people that could, for example, open doors for you. And I think once you are in a job, you need to network as much as possible, try and rotate in terms of your professional registration to be in as many different departments or divisions as possible. So you also know where your interest lies in. And that way you gain experience too in terms of the different jobs that are required.
Thanks, Sai. Celia, perhaps a question for you. You know, as from a South African perspective, small, medium enterprise is crucial to our recovery as an economy. We need young entrepreneurs. So for those young students that come out and out of a system that, like Deborah said, is world-class in terms of transfer of skills, in terms of the hard side of it from an academic perspective, but I want to try my own business. I don't want to be employed by a big organization or be reliant on that form of being employed. What kind of advice could you give to young engineering graduates that are entrepreneurially orientated and that are thinking about taking the plunge or taking the chance and starting their own business or getting involved with an SME, for example?
Thanks for the question, Gary. I think the engineering space is a very practical space, and you're not going to learn anything by just sitting around the table and going through books. You've got to be out there, mingle with the people who are in business. Find somebody that you aspire to be like, or somebody that you see as making good progress in business, and try to mimic how that person is doing it. Ask a lot of questions, and say, how do I, even the pettiest of questions, you'll be surprised how much of an impact they make to how your business turn out to be. Because there isn't a template to say, this is how you're going to do it in order to make it in business. You have to interact, you have to mingle. Some of the things you're going to learn them along the way, and you're going to be thoroughly surprised because you wouldn't have foreseen them right at the beginning, but you learn as you go. A young person who's entering the space, I would say to them, don't be afraid. I mean, Mandela said it sounds impossible, or it seems impossible until it's done. If you're going to sit there and say, going into business is a very difficult thing, indeed it's going to be difficult because you will be a prisoner of your own mind, restricting yourself instead of just jumping into that playing field and trying. Look, you can try and fail, try again and fail. I mean, there isn't anyone who went into business and made a very good start right at the beginning. It's got to be trial and error right from the beginning. And year 1, year 2, year 3, thereafter, people will be like, how did you get to year 5? But you would have, held the hands of people who are in that space. You would have learned from them. You would have tried, you would have failed, tried many times, failed, but eventually, you're gonna get to year 5 and say, this is the journey that I had been through with my business. And it will allow you as well to put what you had learned at an institution of higher learning to practice. And being in this engineering profession come at a very high price. There are great expectations, from society, from us, purely because of the requirements that this field requires from us. So we must make it work for ourselves. And I would say to young professionals, enter the space and be the wind, be the wind in that space that will make change, because you cannot just go in there and slot in with the routine that is that you're going to find happening in there. That would be my advice to them.
Celia, thank you. Some deep insights there for our young professionals. We've come to the end of our webinar, but before I let our esteemed panelists go, I would keep you ladies here for another hour if I could. But Alicia, you mentioned, and I like the concept, your approach of making sure that there's people would notice if I wasn't there. In my interpretation of what you said. So make sure that nobody's indispensable, nobody's irreplaceable. But the day I'm not there, people should notice that I'm not adding the value that I was. So with that as a concept, could I ask each one of our panelists, and I'm going to ask you just to close out with a few thoughts on this. What one bit of advice would you give to young professionals, just from your perspective as a parting thought for today? Can I start with you, Deborah?
I'm busy chatting to answering a question on the chat, so I've missed the question.
What one little bit of advice as a closing thought would you share with our participants today? Would you give to a young professional, something that resonates with you that they could potentially take into the future with them?
So I think that the most important life advice to me is that you've got to know yourself, and you've got to know who you are and what your strengths are, and that changes as you go through life. It changes. So continually be reflective on situations. Figure out, why did you act in such a way? Why did this person respond positively to you? Why did this person not respond positively? Why did this project work well? Think about those questions and play to your strengths, develop your strengths, get to know yourself, and work with that.
Thanks, Deborah. Portia, one last insight from you in terms of what bit of advice should young professionals take on board?
I think I'd say read a lot out of engineering. So read non-technical books, read psychology books, read anything you can get your hands on, because you need to develop more than just your technical skills. And definitely find yourself a mentor or a coach. They don't have to be technical. They don't have to be an engineer. Somebody who can just help guide you within your career. And once you've got that, I think you can sort of then start looking at yourself and deciding which way you want to pursue. Just because everybody goes for GCC, everybody goes for PRN, you need to decide which way you're going and then point all of your ammo in that direction.
Stunning. Thank you, Portia. Alicia, a parting comment from you in terms of advice?
Well, Gary, I actually came up with two in the meantime. So I've always found, know your limitations. I don't know if you guys remember Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Use your lifeline and phone a friend. There's always somebody that knows better. Don't spend days on Google, because you're going to go around in circles. And in the working environment, don't take it personally. It's only business, guys.
Stunning, stunning. Sai, some final insights from you?
You know, I think touching on a lot of the questions that are being asked as well is sometimes, you know, professional registration is optional. But I think it's something that it's a good process to go through. So you go from being an engineer in training to a professional engineer, and you literally go through 3 years of a formal training thing where you have to go through different divisions. So I suggest that a lot of the young engineers or graduate engineers actually go through that and try and accomplish your professional registration, because that will teach you quite a bit.
Brilliant. Thank you. Celia, from you, a final parting thought?
Thanks, Gary. Because this a group of rare and powerful individuals that we are advising, young professionals, still with their books fresh in their heads. I'm going to quote a statement by Sir Isaac Newton, whereby he stated in his first law of motion that an object will continue in its state of motion at the same speed and same direction until acted upon by an equal but opposite force. If there's anything that young professionals are going to forget from today's sitting, this law, I'll urge them not to forget. Purely because this law doesn't only apply to physics. They are going to enter a workspace and learn that if there's anything that they are going to want to change in there, it will be their voice of reason that will influence that change. And if there's anything that they're going to like, it will again be incumbent on them to be the force behind that object to accelerate or rather fast track its output. So that law, I think they're going to need as they enter into a workspace. And I'm consistent with what Portia is saying, to say they mustn't just read engineering books. They must read, even psychology, because for them to make impact, it will take them their cognitive, strength to be able to make that impact more than the engineering theory that we learned. And I feel bound to say this about the inequality in the STEM environment. I think the university is not going to forgive me if I'm going to close without mentioning this. I think the issue of inequality is in our faces. As I entered this space many years ago, the chorus was about how women are underrepresented in the STEM environments. Today, in 2020, we're still saying exactly the same thing. And as you look around, perusing literature that is there, you're going to learn that 86% of the economy of the country is in the hands of 10% of the population, which paints a very ugly picture of our society. So I'm going to urge the engineering companies, the companies in the STEM environment particularly, to champion the cause of change in this regard, and come, somewhere close to closing the gap between male and female representation at workplace. And I'm saying this because the companies in STEM environment are the main, if you like, employers. If they champion the cause in this regard, other businesses are going to follow suit and make sure that we close the gap between males and female, or rather the representation thereof. But thank you very much for today's webinar. It's just a pity that I battled to connect right at the beginning. I feel like I lost most of the discussions that took place here, but I do appreciate the portion that I was able to join. Thank you very much, Gary, and the viewers.
Celia, thank you. And what a wonderful way actually to finish it. I don't think there's anything controversial about what you had to say. We all have our respective frames of reference. And I can certainly say I've been with the company for 2.5 decades. And it's only over the last 10 years that we've been able to convert our team, the industrial team of organizers here, and we've allocated under female leadership. And in fact, I've got 2 ladies, the portfolio director of the electromining event and her marketing manager sitting in my office with me. And I'm telling you now, if there are engineering men out there listening today, things like profits and some of what you spoke to us about, those things will take care of themselves, because if today's webinar is anything to go by, the level of care, we need more women involved in all facets of life. You need only look at the COVID-19 situation, and the countries that have been led by women, it's factual, are more successful and have done better, okay, where they've had female leadership. Taiwan, New Zealand, Germany, just for a start, okay? So I think it underscores exactly what you said, and we've got so much young talent. There are South Africans that are leading in there. We've got Olympic medalists, we've got people that are running global businesses, we've got all sorts of talent in this country. We need to just unlock it, and we need to do so from an inclusive perspective, and we need to embrace genuine transformation in that space. And if we do that, today's webinar is living proof of what is possible. Ladies, thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for giving of your time. Vaughan, you and Anissa, thank you for empowering us to be able to do this. What a wonderful way to close out on an Electromining Africa Connect week. It actually makes me a little bit emotional. The fact that we have so much talent as South Africans, that we can share it, that we can live it. And we don't just share it amongst ourselves, we share it globally. So thank you. Keep up the good work. For those youngsters that are listening, be inspired. Go out there, put yourself out there, as our panelists have said today, and go and fly as South Africans. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. We do appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.